Jeff, thank you for the choice of songs. Every song has been leading us to look at God, to turn our face to Him. And that is my message for this morning. I want to begin with a simple question. What has captured your attention lately? What occupies your thoughts when you wake up in the morning? What fills your mind when you have a few quiet moments? What do you naturally drift toward when no one is telling you what to think about? The answer to those questions matter more than we realize. For we are shaped by what we focus on. We love to look at beautiful things. God created us to be attracted to beauty. When we see something that is beautiful, when we hear a beautiful song, it can stop us in our tracks. It can make us just feel emotions that were not there before. Most of us have experienced moments when we stood before something so breathtaking that it literally stopped us in our tracks. I remember when my co-worker, Robert Reagan, took some young new Christians up into the mountains for a camping trip. And they got up into the mountains. They had to go through the rainforest and to way up in the mountains. And when they pitched their tents, they didn't realize that they pitched their tents next to the edge of a cliff until they woke up the next morning. And they were looking into a valley. And the sun was just coming up. It hadn't reached the mountains yet. Mist was coming, and they were just stunned in silence at how beautiful it was. Robert took this picture with a little old iPhone. It was like 10 years ago, and so it doesn't do justice to what they're seeing, and it's still beautiful. King David understood that feeling when he wrote, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands." But you know, as beautiful as this world is, as beautiful as music is and art, there's something infinitely more beautiful. David describes this beauty in Psalms 27. "One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord." Think about that. Of all the things that King David could have pursued in his position, the one thing that he wanted over everything else, over his power, over his money, over whatever he could have, it was to gaze upon the beauty of God. Today, I want us to consider a life-changing truth. What captures your attention will shape your life. I recently read a fascinating book called Wrapped: Attention and the Focused Life by Winifred Gallagher. Gallagher argues that the quality of your life is determined largely by what you choose to focus on. Not your circumstances, not your appearances, not your possessions, but your attention. I saw this principle play out in one of my high school friends, I remember. Our junior year, he invited me over to his house, and I went into his room, and I was really surprised. Every spare bit of his walls was covered in posters of rock stars, mainly Van Halen and Guns N' Roses. And if you're from that era of time, you know that the dressing, the way that people dressed was a little bit different. Could we get that picture of Van Halen up there? They liked bandanas for some reason back in the 80s. I'm glad that this trend didn't continue very long. But I noticed the impact of him looking at these posters every day, because the first day of our senior year, he came to school wearing raggedy jeans like these guys, a bandana around his wrist, and a bandana around his neck. And I saw this principle played out in his life. He was looking like what he admired every day. Gallagher's conclusion is straightforward. Your life becomes a sum of what you focus on. What you repeatedly notice becomes what you value, and what you value eventually becomes who you are. I'm going to repeat that because this is important. What you repeatedly notice becomes what you value, and what you value eventually becomes who you are. And this is not merely a psychological principle, it's also a biblical principle. Long before modern behavioral science, God revealed this truth in his word. Paul writes in Colossians 3, "Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." Notice that Paul commands us to direct our attention. He says, set your minds. The focus of your mind matters. Similarly, in Romans chapter 8, Paul says, those who live according to the flesh have their mind set on what the flesh desires. But those who live according to the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. And what is the result? The mind governed by the flesh is death. But the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. Every day, we are setting our minds on something. The question is not whether or not we are focused. The question is, what are we focused on? What happens when we choose to focus on Jesus? The writer of Hebrews tells us that Christ is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. Jesus perfectly reflects his Father. Then Paul gives us this astonishing promise in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, I think that's really important. Turning away from the world and turning to the Lord to look at him. What happens? The veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled faces, contemplate the Lord's glory. Think about the Lord's glory. Dwell upon his words. Look to his face. We are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory. Notice what Paul does not say. He does not say we transform ourselves. He says we are being transformed. It is passive. As we behold Christ, the Spirit changes us. We choose to look at him, and as we look at him, he changes us. Christianity is not ultimately self-improvement. It is Christ-centered transformation. There is a wisdom in the world that this is where the wisdom of the world reaches its limit. Better focus can help you lose weight. Better focus can make you more money. Better focus can improve your habits. But no amount of human focus can make you holy. No amount of willpower can purify your heart. Only Jesus can do that. And he does it as we behold his power and glory. He does it as we look to his beauty. He changes us as we contemplate his powerful words. The word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It cuts into our heart. It reveals our thoughts and our intentions. It is not a dead book that was written 2,000 years ago. It is a word of God. It is alive and gives us life. Titus tells us this in chapter 2. For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. That grace teaches us to say no to ungodliness, no to worldly passions. And it gives us the ability to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. The grace that saves us is also the grace that changes us. A heart focused on Jesus receives power to resist temptation. A heart focused on Jesus receives power to serve. A heart focused on Jesus receives power and the ability to make disciples of Jesus. This brings us to an important truth. Our attention is a choice. Jesus illustrated this through Mary and Martha. Martha was busy serving. Mary chose to sit at Jesus' feet. When Martha complained about this, Jesus answered, "You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better." Did you hear that word? Chosen. Mary made a choice. Serving the guests wasn't wrong. Preparing food is not sinful. But Mary chose what is better. She chose the presence of Jesus. She chose to listen to every word that he said. She chose the one thing that mattered the most. Church, every day we make similar choices. We choose to do with our time, what we choose to do with our time eventually shapes our desires. Our desires shape our character, and our character shapes the direction of our lives. I learned this lesson personally during my final semester at Texas A&M. I had taken 2 years of Mandarin Chinese, and I was really surprised to learn that I received a full year scholarship, all expenses paid, to study in Taiwan. And I was elated. This was an incredible opportunity, but there was one complication. Michelle and I were dating, and the relationship was becoming quite serious. So I sat down and I asked Michelle, "What do you think?" And she said, "David, I am so excited for you. This is a great opportunity." But then she said, "Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to feel if we're gone from each other for a year." I had a decision to make. The scholarship could enhance my resume and open up opportunities for my future, but it might cost me Michelle. It took me about 30 seconds to decide. I chose Michelle, and the rest is history. A few months later, I gave her a little baby bunny, and when she picked it up, I had hidden a engagement ring around the neck, hidden in its fur. And as soon as she found that, she immediately said yes. Looking back, that choice changed the trajectory of my whole future. Why? Because I chose what had greater value. And the choice revealed what my heart truly desired as well. The same principle applies to us spiritually. If God is our greatest treasure, is that reflected in the choices that we make? Is it reflected in our schedules? Is it reflected in our spending? Is it reflected in our priorities? Is it reflected in our attention? One of the greatest threats to our spiritual lives is not the obvious thing, obvious sin. Sometimes it is simply other things. Jesus spoke about this in the parable of the sower. In the third soil, healthy soil, some seed fell among the thorns. When the disciples didn't understand this parable, they asked him about it, and Jesus explained. The worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word. So notice that phrase, the desires for other things. Not necessarily sinful things, just lesser things. Good things, good gifts that become our ultimate desire. Comfort, entertainment, success, busyness, pleasure, possessions, distractions. My children, my wife. Anything can be substituted for Jesus on the throne of our hearts. It doesn't have to be that we're addicted to sin. John Piper wrote in Hunger for God, the greatest enemy of hunger for God is not poison, but apple pie. He goes on to say, it is not the X-rated video, but the endless stream of triviality. This is a powerful observation. Many of us are not starving spiritually because of rebellion or an addiction to sin. We are starving spiritually because we are constantly snacking on the lesser things of this world. We are filling ourselves with so much entertainment, so much stimulation, that we are being satiated by this world. And we live in a culture drowning in distractions. The average American spends 7 to 12 hours every day looking at screens, depending upon your demographic. Phones, televisions, streaming platforms, social media, games, news feeds, notifications. Our attention is constantly being captured and sold. We must ask ourselves, what is all of this noise doing to our souls? Can it be that we have become so full of entertainment that we are no longer hungry for God? I wonder what God could do in our lives if even a fraction of that attention was redirected toward God. I remember listening to one of Scott Sager's sermons 14, 15 years ago, and he was really on. He was preaching. I was following him, and then I remembered I had a nice dinner planned for that night at a steakhouse. And guys, I really love medium rare ribeye steaks. And I started thinking about that steak. I started salivating. And then Scott got to the end of this sermon, and I realized I hadn't been listening to him for 5 minutes. I missed the conclusion of the sermon because I was thinking about a steak. My attention had wandered. Now, there is a bit of humor to it, but it also reveals something serious. The heart naturally drifts to whatever it wants the most. So what do we do about this? How do we redirect our heart? The writer of Hebrews gives us the answer. Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. Notice the two categories here. Throw off not only the sin, but also everything else that hinders, everything else in your life that gets in the way between you and following Jesus, between you and seeing Jesus. Get it out of the way. That is our choice. Some things are sinful, Many other things are simply distractions. Both can keep us from Jesus. Both can weaken our spiritual appetite. Both can keep us from experiencing the fullness of God's presence and the power to change us and to fill our hearts. The writer says, throw them off. Why? Because Jesus is better. He is more satisfying. He is more beautiful. He is more glorious. He is more powerful. He is more life-giving. The problem is not that God's table is empty. The problem is that we are filling ourselves with the crumbs of the world and think we have the best. We have become content with the gifts while neglecting the giver. We often settle for the lesser pleasures of this life while ignoring the greatest pleasure. So in conclusion, let me ask the question I started with. What has captured your attention? If someone were to watch your life for 30 days, what would they conclude is most important to you? What occupies your thoughts? What fills your heart? What dominates your time? Because what captures your attention will eventually shape your life. What you repeatedly behold and treasure, you will become. Jesus said it this way, where your treasure is, there is your heart also. Church, the good news that Jesus is not standing here condemning us today. He is inviting us to something better. He is inviting us to a feast. And that feast is not just in heaven, it is in the here and the now. It is experiencing His presence. It is experiencing His love. It is looking to His face and being transformed by His beauty and His glory. That is His invitation. The world wants your attention. Your phone wants your attention. Your career wants your attention. But Jesus is more worthy of your attention. Jesus is worthy of your affection. Jesus is worthy of your devotion. Fix your eyes on Jesus.